fame, success, and mental illness. This story will shake you to your core. The year was 2004. Madison Square Garden was electrified. It was the final match of WrestleMania 20s, and thousands of fans were on their feet. Chris Benoit had reached the pinnacle of his career. With tears in his eyes, he held the World Championship belt over his shoulders. The moment he had dreamed of for years had finally come true. By his side was his closest friend, Eddie Guerrero. The two champions embraced in the middle of the ring as the crowd erupted in cheers. It was a moment of triumph, the ultimate career achievement. But no one could have predicted that just a few years later, the name Chris Benoit would no longer be associated with glory but with horror. Chris Benoit was known as the embodiment of discipline and hard work in the wrestling world. From the moment he stepped into the ring, people recognized his relentless drive. He had traveled the world, wrestling in Japan, Mexico, and Europe, impressing audiences with his technique and strength. In the ring, he was tough, focused, and unstoppable. At home, he was a different man, a devoted father to his son, Daniel, and a husband to his wife, Nancy. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect family. But behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. In 2003, Nancy filed for divorce. In her court documents, she described Chris's uncontrollable fits of rage, violent tendencies, and erratic behavior. However, she later withdrew the case, hoping to salvage their marriage. That decision would turn out to be a fatal mistake. The biggest turning point in Chris Benoit's life came in 2005, when his best friend, Eddie Guerrero, died unexpectedly. Eddie's death shattered Benoit. He couldn't sleep, he sank into depression, and there were days when he wouldn't speak to anyone. Even during training, he seemed mentally absent, disconnected from reality. But the real problem was something no one could see. It was inside his brain. Over the course of his career, Benoit had taken countless blows to the head. Without even realizing it, his brain had suffered irreversible damage. Years later, medical examinations would reveal that Benoit's brain had deteriorated to the level of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient, severely impacting his ability to control his emotions. But back then, no one had any idea. Until June 22, 2007, Chris Benoit was supposed to fly to Texas for a major WWE event. But he never boarded that flight. Instead, he locked himself inside his house. That night would turn into an unimaginable nightmare. He and Nancy had a heated argument. His rage spiraled out of control. He wrapped a cable around her neck and squeezed with all his strength. Within minutes, Nancy was dead. Chris covered her body with a blanket and placed a Bible beside her. The next morning, he walked into his son's bedroom. Daniel was sleeping peacefully, unaware of what was about to happen. Chris made the ultimate, irreversible decision. He strangled his son to death. He then placed a Bible beside his lifeless body. Then, he went to his home gym. He picked up a heavy weight cord, wrapped it around his neck, attached it to the weightlifting machine, and ended his own life. The world learned of the incident days later. At first, WWE announced Chris Benoit's death without knowing the full story. But as the details surfaced, the shock was overwhelming. Chris Benoit's name was completely erased. WWE removed all his matches from their archives. His name was never spoken again. But there were still unanswered questions. Had Chris Benoit simply lost his mind, or was he a victim of the years of brain trauma he had endured? Autopsies revealed that his brain damage had destroyed his ability to regulate emotions and impulses. But that didn't justify what he had done. Chris Benoit, once one of the most respected wrestlers in history, would forever be remembered not as a champion but as a murderer. Once, he stood victorious in the ring, but his actions condemned him to eternal darkness.